The snow was falling gently over the cold land of Winterfell. The sky was gray, the wind sharp, and the people were busy preparing for the long winter. No one expected a dragon to appear from the clouds, its wings slicing through the cold air like a sword. Behind it flew another, and below them rode 3 strangers from the south Daenerys Targaryen, Missandei and Grey Worm, making their way through the thick snow, far ahead of Jon Snow and the rest. They had flown north in urgency, wanting to reach Winterfell before the others. Daenerys believed that if she showed up early, the Northerners would have time to get used to her presence, to see her not as a threat, but as an ally. She wanted to earn their trust, not demand it. But she also knew the North had never loved outsiders, especially not Targaryens. As they landed just outside the gates of Winterfell, the dragons roared. People screamed and ran for cover. Guards raised their weapons, and the castle went on high alert. But Daenerys, calm and proud, walked forward with Missandei and Grey Worm by her side. She wore her thick white coat, her silver hair falling freely down her shoulders. She looked like snow and fire at once. Grey Worm stood close, ever protective, and Missandei held her breath, nervous but standing tall. The gates opened slowly. Sansa Stark stepped forward, wrapped in her furs, guarded by men with arrows pointed towards the dragons. She didn't flinch. Her eyes, cold and sharp, scanned the woman who called herself queen. "You were not expected so soon," Sansa said, her voice polite but distant. "I came early," Daenerys replied softly. "To show I mean no harm. I come not just as a queen, but as a woman who wants to save the world from death." Sansa looked past her at the dragons, and then at Grey Worm, who stood like a silent blade. "People are frightened. They'll learn I am not here to frighten them," Daenerys said. "I am here to fight with them." It was quiet for a moment. Then Sansa gave a nod, and the guards slowly lowered their weapons. The dragons settled on the hill behind them, steam rising from their mouths. The gates opened wider. "You may come in," Sansa said, "but you will find the North is not easily won." As they entered, people whispered behind frozen doors. Children peeked through cracks. Some stared at Missandei, her brown skin unfamiliar in this land of pale faces. Others looked at Grey Worm in silence, unsure whether to see him as a warrior or an enemy. Inside the castle, the fire burned, but the warmth was missing. Daenerys sat by the flames with Missandei beside her. Grey Worm remained standing near the door, alert as always. They were not welcomed as heroes. They were guests, nothing more. Later that evening, Arya appeared, quiet and sharp-eyed. She said little, but studied Daenerys with curiosity. "You ride dragons," she said. "Yes," Daenerys replied, smiling gently. "And I hope one day you'll ride beside me into battle." Arya gave a faint smirk. "We'll see." Missandei sat alone for a while near the hearth, her mind filled with memories of warm beaches and soft winds. Winterfell felt like another world, cold, distant, and silent. People barely spoke to her. Some looked at her as if she didn't belong. Grey Worm noticed. He stayed close to her, even as the Unsullied arrived the next day to guard the queen. "This place is not for us," Missandei whispered to him when they stood alone in the snow. He looked at her with calm eyes. "We protect her. That is our path." But something was already shifting in the wind. The people of the North were slow to trust. And though Daenerys had arrived early to show peace, it only gave them more time to judge her in silence. Winterfell did not burn, but neither did it melt. The next morning, the chill had grown sharper, and the moon in Winterfell was no warmer. Daenerys stood on the highest tower, watching her dragons rest in the snow-covered hills outside the walls. They looked out of place beasts of fire surrounded by ice, just like her. She had flown north with hope, but what she felt now was something colder than the wind, rejection. Inside the castle, whispers moved faster than the servants. People called her Dragon Queen with tight lips. Some said she was another mad Targaryen. A few even joked that she would burn the north like her father once tried to. Missandei heard it all, though no one said it to her face. She had learned to smile politely, to nod and walk away. But the stares were crueler here, longer. Like people weren't just curious, but offended by her presence. A black woman in the halls of the proud north? She might as well have been a ghost. Grey Worm saw it too. He watched everything. His face never showed anger, but his grip on his spear tightened each time someone avoided Missandei or looked at her with disgust. The North had fought many wars, but they were still prisoners of their small minds. That afternoon, Sansa invited Daenerys for a private talk. They sat across from each other in a quiet room lit by firelight and shadow. There was no wine, no laughter, only the sound of crackling wood and sharp words. "You arrived before your army," Sansa said, calm but cold. That was unexpected. Daenerys kept her voice soft. "I wanted to build trust." "Trust," Sansa repeated. "That takes time. And the North remembers. Your grace. We don't forget how the South treats us. You're here to fight the dead." "Yes. But afterward? What happens to the North then?" "I am not here to steal your land," Daenerys said, but there was steel under her silk. "I came to end the Night King. I came to help. And yet," Sansa said, standing slowly, "people here are already wondering what kind of queen brings dragons to a starving people. What kind of queen brings foreign soldiers into our home?" "They're my people," Daenerys replied, her eyes narrowing slightly. Sansa met her gaze without blinking. "But not ours." That night, the tension grew heavier. Arya spoke to Jon through a raven's message he and the rest were still days away. But by then, the atmosphere in Winterfell had already changed. The queen had not been welcomed. She had been measured and found lacking. In the barracks, the Unsullied stood at attention. They did not smile. They did not speak much. The Northmen didn't like them. They were different. Obedient, quiet, black-skinned warriors who showed no emotion. Some called them unnatural. Grey Worm ignored it until a young guard muttered under his breath, "The Queen's pet soldiers." Grey Worm turned, walked up to the man, and stared into his eyes. He said nothing, but the message was clear. The guard looked away, pretending he'd said nothing. Missandei had it worse. When she entered the kitchens to speak with the maids, silence fell. No one would look at her. When she asked for water, they handed it to her without a word and walked away quickly, as if her presence was poison. Later, as she sat alone in her room, she whispered, "We were better off in Meereen." Daenerys came in then. She'd heard the stories. She could see the sadness in Missandei's eyes. "I should have known," Daenerys said quietly. "The North is proud, but I didn't expect them to be cruel. They fear what they don't understand," Missandei replied, brushing her hair slowly. "No," Daenerys said. "They hate what they don't control." Grey Worm stood by the door, silent. He knew what hate looked like. And in Winterfell, it wore polite faces and cold smiles. But hate was still hate. Daenerys looked into the fire. Her jaw was clenched. The warmth she had tried to bring was fading, and something darker was beginning to rise inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not yet rage, but something close. 2 days passed, and the cold in Winterfell was no longer just weather, it was mood. Daenerys began walking the halls less, riding her dragons more. Each time she soared over the north, she saw the same thing: closed doors, silent faces, and people who didn't cheer or wave, only stared with wary eyes. She had come with peace. But now, peace was slipping from her fingers like snow in the wind. Grey Worm had increased the Unsullied patrols around her chambers. He didn't trust the North. And when a dead rabbit was found nailed to the door of one of the Unsullied's barracks, he was proven right. No words were written, but the message was clear: not welcome. Daenerys gathered with Missandei and Grey Worm in the war room that evening. A fire burned low in the corner, but no one felt warm. "I tried kindness," she said, her voice sharp. "I tried humility. And still they look at me like I'm the enemy." Missandei stood close, her voice gentle. "They see your dragons, your army, your power. They're afraid of losing control." Daenerys looked at her, eyes narrowing slightly. "Then maybe they should fear losing something more." Grey Worm remained quiet, but his face was stone. He had always followed orders. But now, his loyalty was not just to a queen. It was personal. He had seen how they looked at Missandei, how they looked at him, not with fear, but with disgust. Across the castle, Sansa met with a few northern lords in secret. One of them, Lord Glover, voiced what many were already thinking. "She comes with dragons and dark-skinned warriors, speaking of peace. But peace doesn't fly on wings of fire." Sansa didn't respond at first. She looked out the window toward the snowy hills where the dragons rested. "She says she's here to help," she finally said, "but I don't think she understands the North. She thinks loyalty is something you buy with fear or beauty." "She's her father's daughter," Lord Trywin added. "Burn the world if it doesn't love her." Sansa didn't disagree. The next morning, Arya returned to Winterfell ahead of Jon. When she walked through the gates, her eyes immediately caught the change. The Unsullied were everywhere, watching. The northern guards were tense. The mood felt like a storm waiting to break. Arya found Daenerys in the courtyard, standing near one of the dragons. "You're not making friends," Arya said bluntly. Daenerys turned, surprised by the girl's cold tone. "I came to save this place." "Maybe," Arya said, stepping closer. "But you're losing it before the war even begins." Daenerys looked at her, the wind catching her silver hair. "They don't want saving. They want bending. I won't bow to their pride." Arya gave a half-smile. "Neither will they." Later that night, Missandei went for a walk along the outer wall. She needed air, space, something other than the stairs and silence. She wore thick furs, but still shivered. As she passed a group of northern boys drinking and laughing, one of them muttered, "Go back to wherever you came from." She froze. Another added, "She's just a servant. Bet the queen's using her for her dirty work." Missandei turned slowly, her eyes cold. "You think silence makes you clever?" The boys laughed, but then they saw a Grey Worm walking toward them. Calm, slow, deadly. The laughter died. "Say it again," Grey Worm said, voice low. They didn't. One backed away. The other stared for a moment, then spat in the snow and walked off. Missandei said nothing. She only reached for Grey Worm's arm, and for a moment she wasn't the calm advisor. She was just a woman, tired of being unseen. That night, Daenerys stood by the fire in her chambers, her hands trembling not from cold, but fury. The North was testing her, and she wasn't sure how much more patience she had left. "When Jon arrives," she said to Missandei, "he'll speak for me." Missandei nodded, but her eyes were filled with doubt. She didn't say it, but part of her wondered, would Jon speak for her? Or for the North? Because in this castle of old ghosts and proud names, Daenerys wasn't just losing trust. She was losing herself. Jon Snow arrived 3 days later, and Winterfell came alive, but not with joy. It was relief, like a storm had passed and left everyone standing, wet and shaken. The people trusted Jon. He was their blood, their North. But when he rode in and went straight to Daenerys, hugging her in full view of the courtyard, the whispers began again. "She's bewitched him," one said. "He'll give the North to her," said another. Jon didn't hear them, or maybe he did, and just didn't care. He had seen the Dead March. He knew what was coming. Politics didn't matter when death had no face. But Daenerys, she noticed. She always noticed. That night, in the same hall where the Starks once ruled, Jon sat beside her at the high table. Sansa watched them with tight lips, Arya with sharp eyes. The tension wasn't just in the air, it was the air. After the feast, Jon pulled Sansa aside. "She's here to help," he said quietly. "Why are you making this harder?" Sansa folded her arms. "She wants the North. She wants to live," Jon replied. "Just like the rest of us." But Sansa shook her head. "You've seen her dragons, her army, her confidence. She doesn't want survival. Jon, she wants worship, out of fear." That morning, Tyrion found her in the council room, alone with Grey Worm and Missandei. "We need to calm things," he said. "You're tightening your grip, and the North is beginning to choke." Daenerys didn't look at him. "Let them choke if they can't breathe in a new world." Tyrion sighed. "This isn't Mirren. You can't break centuries of tradition in a week." "I don't need a week," she said, finally facing him. "Just a choice. They bow or they burn." Grey Worm didn't flinch. Missandei's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She had defended the North too many times already. She was done explaining herself to people who saw her as less than human. Tyrion stepped forward. "You'll lose Jon." Daenerys' face shifted. For the first time in days, emotion flickered across her features. "I already am," she said softly. Jon was slipping further into silence. The more he tried to bridge the divide between her and the North, the more both sides pulled away. Even Arya looked at him now with something close to pity, as if she knew he had already made a mistake he couldn't undo. That night it happened. A brawl broke out near the Unsullied camp. A drunk group of northern men, young, arrogant, angry, picked a fight with two Unsullied guards. They called them animals, cowards, slave soldiers. One even spat in Grey Worm's face when he arrived to stop it. Grey Worm didn't draw his blade. He just broke the man's arm with one swift move. But by morning, the man was dead. No wounds, just frost. He'd passed out drunk in the snow, alone. Still, the rumor spread. The Dragon Queen's soldiers had killed a northern man. By mid-morning, a crowd formed at the gates. Angry voices, shouting for justice, shouting for her to leave. Sansa tried to calm them, but her presence only made things worse. Some thought she had allowed this from the start. Inside, Daenerys sat calmly on her throne-like seat, her dragons roaring faintly in the background from the hills. Missandei stood beside her, and Grey Worm stood before her, ready for orders. Jon burst in. "This has to stop," he said. "They're calling for war in the middle of winter." "They started the war when they spat on my people," Daenerys said coldly. Jon stepped closer, his voice low. "You came here for peace." "I came here to win," she replied. "And they never wanted peace. They wanted me quiet, soft, obedient." Missandei nodded. "They never saw her as a queen, only as a threat." Jon looked at her, heart heavy. "She's becoming the threat they feared." Daenerys stood. Her voice didn't rise. "It didn't need to. I offered them alliance. They gave me stones. I offered them my heart. They gave me poison." She walked past Jon down the steps. "They will not give me loyalty, Jon, so I will take it." That night the dragons flew. Not over the people, not over the walls, but over the outer fields, scorching the land in a controlled burn. A warning. No deaths. No fire inside Winterfell. But the message was crystal clear. The Queen has teeth. The next morning, the snow was blackened with ash. Sansa stood on the battlements, watching the smoke rise from the horizon. "She's showing them what she's capable of," Arya said beside her. "She's no different from Cersei," Sansa replied coldly. "Just younger. And with wings." In her chambers, Daenerys stood silent, staring into the mirror. Missandei brushed her silver hair gently. "You were right to do it," she whispered. "They only respect fear." Daenerys said nothing. But the flames in her eyes were no longer flickering. They were rising. And Winterfell was about to learn. Even snow can burn. The night before the dead were expected to arrive, Winterfell felt like a tomb. The air was thick with smoke from burned fields and whispers from unspoken fears. People didn't talk in full sentences anymore. They exchanged looks, half sentences, and long silences. The dragons circled above like gods of war, watching, waiting. And below, in the great hall, Daenerys stood alone. Jon had not spoken to her in 2 days. Not since the fires. Not since she proved she didn't need northern permission to rule. She heard footsteps. Jon entered, his cloak heavy with frost. He looked tired, more soldier than king, more man than myth. "You've turned them all against you," he said quietly. She didn't turn to face him. "No, they turned themselves. This isn't the way." Daenerys finally turned. "You mean the northern way? The slow way? The way that kills people like Missandei with looks instead of blades?" Her voice cracked. "Just a little. They hate us, Jon. Not because of what we do, but because of what we are." Jon stepped forward. "I still believe in you, but not enough," she said softly, brokenly. "Not to fight your own blood. Not to stand with me when they spit at my name." Jon's eyes dropped, because it was true. "I've seen war," she whispered. "I've seen cities burn. I've freed slaves, broken chains. But I have never felt more like an outsider than here." "And yet you want to rule it," Jon said. Daenerys walked past him, toward the war table. The wooden board was covered in tiny figures, dragons, wolves, white walkers. "I don't want to rule the North," she said. "I want to survive it." In the silence that followed, Tyrion entered with grave news. "They're coming, the dead. They'll reach the outer defenses by tomorrow night." Jon and Daenerys shared a glance. Whatever distance lay between them would have to wait. Death was marching. As the castle prepared, tensions didn't melt. They hardened. Northern soldiers refused to take orders from unsullied commanders. Missandei was openly insulted while delivering logistical plans. Someone left a noose made from rope and black hair in front of Grey Worm's door. He said nothing about it. But the next morning, 2 northern guards were found bloodied, not dead, but unconscious outside the unsullied camp. No one spoke of it, but everyone knew what it meant. Arya approached Jon later that day as he strapped on his sword. "You should have never brought her here," she said. "She's not built for this place." "She's stronger than any of us," Jon replied. "That's the problem," Arya said. "And now we're all stuck between fire and ice." In the tower, Daenerys stood alone again, staring out over the walls. Missandei joined her, silent at first. "I dreamed of this," Missandei said. "Being by your side, helping the world become something new. But this place, it's not part of that dream." Daenerys looked at her, eyes wet. "Neither is dying in a place that hates you." Missandei reached out and took her hand. "Then don't die as their queen," she said. "Live as our queen. Let them fear you. Let them need you." Later that night, the final war council was called. Jon, Daenerys, Tyrion, Sansa, Arya, Grey Worm, Brienne, and Davos stood around the table, lit by a single flickering torch. "The Night King will target Bran," Jon said. "He wants the past. He wants to erase everything. We'll place him in the Godswood," Bran added quietly. "As bait." Sansa's voice was flat. "And after?" The room stilled. "After the dead are defeated," she said, looking straight at Daenerys. "Do we go back to burning fields and threats?" Daenerys stared at her, unblinking. "No," she said. "After this, I build the world I promised, with or without our blessing." Sansa pressed. "With or without your permission," Daenerys answered. The room fell into deep, dangerous quiet. The fire cracked. Tyrion exhaled slowly. "Well then," he said, pouring himself a drink. "If we survive this, I imagine we'll kill each other next." But as they all began to leave, Jon stayed behind, his eyes on Daenerys. "We fight together tomorrow," he said. "No matter what." Daenerys didn't answer. But when the dragons screamed in the distance, the sound carried something more than warning. It carried prophecy, because the dead were close now, and the Queen of Fire was done asking for love. She would settle for ashes. Jon didn't respond, because part of him knew maybe Sansa wasn't wrong. Elsewhere in the castle, Missandei tried once again to speak with some of the northern women. She brought blankets, offered to help in the kitchens, tried to join their world. But they avoided her as if she were diseased. When one of them finally said, "We don't need help from her kind," Missandei left without a word. Her hands trembled, not from rage, but from humiliation. Grey Worm found her alone by the dragons. She was crying quietly, her face hidden. "I want to go home," she whispered. "Anywhere. This place is all stone and hate." He didn't speak, just sat beside her, placing a hand on hers. The fire from the dragons warmed the snow around them, but it couldn't melt the cold inside their hearts. Inside the strategy room, Daenerys stood before Jon, her eyes searching his face. "They hate me," she said. "They don't know you," Jon replied. "I gave up everything to come here." "I know." She stepped closer. "And still, they look at me like I'm the enemy." Jon touched her cheek. "They'll see, in time." But she pulled away. "I'm not sure I care anymore," she said. "Let them hate me. Let them fear me. At least then they'll listen." Jon looked at her, really looked. The woman he loved, the fire in her eyes was growing wild. Beautiful, yes, but dangerous too. 2 days later, during a council meeting, Daenerys proposed placing more Unsullied at the inner gates. "In case of sabotage," she said. Sansa objected. "You want to guard us from ourselves?" "No," Daenerys replied calmly. "From stupidity." The room froze. Tyrion coughed to break the silence, but the damage was done. Lords exchanged looks. Sansa's eyes narrowed. After the meeting, Arya found Jon. "She's not like us," she said. "You think she's love. But she's fire, Jon. Fire burns." "I won't abandon her," he said. "Then she'll burn for you," Arya whispered. "And maybe we all will too." That night, something changed. Daenerys stood alone on the ramparts, watching the snow fall like ash. Her dragon slept behind her. Missandei approached, eyes red. "They'll never love us," she said. "No matter what we do." Daenerys didn't reply. Her silence was louder than any scream. "They don't deserve you," Missandei added. But Daenerys finally spoke, her voice low and steady. "Maybe love isn't what I need." Grey Worm, standing in the shadows, heard her, and he understood. She had flown north for peace, but maybe, just maybe, it was fear that would open the gates. The next morning broke with a sky the color of iron. Winterfell was quieter than usual, as if the walls themselves were listening. Daenerys walked through the courtyard with Grey Worm and Missandei beside her, and every pair of northern eyes followed them, not with curiosity, not with caution, with judgment. Jon tried to stand beside her, to show unity, but even he could feel the chill that wasn't from the snow. As he walked with her, men he grew up with avoided his gaze. Some barely nodded. One muttered, "Traitor to the north," when he thought Jon was too far to hear. Jon heard. Daenerys heard too, and something flamed inside her, quiet, dangerous. Later, during a weapons training session, Arya watched the Unsullied drill. Their movements were perfect, precise, almost inhuman. The northern soldiers whispered behind her. "They fight like machines. No honor in that. Wouldn't trust them at my back." Grey Worm heard. He didn't respond, but his jaw tightened. Then one of the northern men said, not even hiding his voice, They're slaves, whatever name they give themselves. Grey Worm stepped forward instantly. Unsullied are not slaves, he said, voice sharp like steel. The man laughed. Then what are you? A free man who follows every order like a dog. Missandei stepped between them before Grey Worm could move closer. Walk away, she whispered to him. They want you angry, and it was true. The North didn't just hate Daenerys. They hated everything that came with her. By afternoon, the tension had reached the council room. Daenerys stood before a table of northern leaders, Jon at her side, Tyrion watching nervously. We must prepare for the Night King's attack, Daenerys said. The Unsullied will guard the inner gates. My dragons will... No. Sansa's voice cut across the room. No, she repeated. You will not place your soldiers inside our walls, like we are the enemy. Daenerys leaned forward. If the dead breach the outer gates, we need trained warriors inside. We have trained warriors, Sansa said coldly. Our own. Your men have never faced an army of the dead, and yours have never faced the North. The room fell still. Jon tried to speak, but Daenerys raised her hand. The two women stared at each other, not as allies, not even as rivals, but as two queens in a world that could not fit both. Tyrion finally broke in. My ladies, please? But Daenerys stood, the fire in her eyes dangerously bright. I came here early, she said, to build trust, to show good faith. But every step I take, you push me back. Sansa's face was unreadable. Maybe because you arrived not as a guest, but as a conqueror. Missandei inhaled sharply, and Grey Worm stepped closer to Daenerys. Daenerys' voice dropped lower, steadier. After the Night King is defeated, she said, the North will remember who stood with them, and who stood against me. Not a threat. Not yet, but close. That evening, Jon followed Daenerys to her chambers. She stood near the window, watching her dragons curl in the snow. You're letting them get to you, Jon said softly. You're letting them insult me, Daenerys replied without turning. I'm trying to keep the peace. There is no peace here, she said. Not for me, not for my people, not for Missandei, not for the Unsullied. Jon tried again. They just need time. Daenerys finally faced him, her eyes tired. How much time, Jon? Until they freeze me out? Until they hurt my people? Until they break me piece by piece? Jon stepped closer. They won't hurt you. Daenerys' voice was barely a whisper. They already are. Missandei entered then, tears still in her eyes, but anger burning too. Your Grace, she said, Lord Glover refused to work with me again. He said he does not take orders from Valyrian pets. Jon looked horrified. Daenerys looked calm, too calm. Grey Worm came in next. Some Northmen threw stones at the Unsullied barracks, he said. They said dragons should burn us out. Jon swore under his breath. I'll handle them. No, Daenerys said quietly. You won't. Jon froze. What do you mean? She stepped forward, her voice turning to ice. I will handle them. Missandei and Grey Worm exchanged a look. They had seen that tone before, in Meereen, in slaver cities where Daenerys had chosen justice over forgiveness. And Winterfell. Winterfell was pushing her toward that edge again. As Daenerys looked out the window, the dragons stirred, their growls deep and restless. They don't want my kindness, she whispered. Her fingers curled slowly. Then they will learn to live with my fire. The next dawn rose blood red, casting Winterfell in a strange glow that made even the snow look bruised. Something in the air had shifted. The guards felt it. The servants felt it. The Unsullied moved differently, now tighter formations, sharper discipline, their silence no longer humble, but cold and watchful. And Daenerys, she barely spoke. She no longer waited for northern approval. She no longer smiled at their courtesies. She stood taller, walked straighter, and when she passed through the halls, people moved aside, not out of respect,